right. Shalom, 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 shalom. First and foremost, giving infinite praises, glory, and honor unto Yahawah by Hashem, Yahushua by Hashem, HASHAM. Giving double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone and shalom and salutation to all you sincere Akim across the four winds, pushing this truth with sincerity of heart. I'm your fellow servant, Kassam Magan from the DC camp, coming at you through the spirit and power of Yahawah by Hashem, Yahushua by Hashem, QADASH, and the elect. Now, in this lesson, we're going to go into prophecy, dealing with the empire, aka that beast in Revelation, the 13th, aka ancient Rome. All right, aka the reincarnation of ancient Rome, which is the virgin daughter of Babylon, aka the United States of America. We're just going to go into prophecy and touch on some things that would definitely just reaffirm. And also, because what prophecy does is it reaffirms the credibility of the scriptures. Because you have a lot of individuals that believe that the book is just a book of fairy tales. You have a lot of Israelites that don't believe in the Bible. You have a lot of Israelites that believe, but yet because they don't, well, I'm not going to say that they believe. They know that they're Israelites, but because they don't follow after prophecies, they basically lose faith. All right. And you have a lot of wandering souls. But us in Great Millstone, through the spirit and power of Yahawah by Shemel Shah, man, we come in the spirit of Yahweh Shah, which is the spirit of prophecy. And as the teachers, we have to constantly go and teach and go into the scriptures and bring actual events, stats that's going on right now, and have it match with the scriptures to bring about it to life, the validity and credibility of the scriptures. All right, so without further ado, we're going to go into it. This is, as the title states, it's the empire will not survive this deadly wound. All right, so the deadly wound, actually, when we're talking about the empire now, of course, what you see right here is Rome. This was Rome basically was that empire, which we're going to go into Revelation 13. It says the beast from the sea. It says, and I stood upon the sea and of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So, of course, these are kingdoms. So that's why you have to go into, of course, going back into the past, where, of course, you had the Babylonians, you had Medo-Persian Empire, then you had the Greeks, which, they were kind of known as, Alexander was known as a leopard, which, the Greeks were, the leaders of Greece, those were Edomites. All right. Then eventually, when you leave, when you go from the Greeks, you go to the next empire, which is Rome. And then you had a transition called the Greco-Roman Empire. And Rome came in, and basically, that's why I have Rome right here. Rome came in, basically established what's called a Senate, established what's called a capital, all these different things. The way the system is built in the United States right now, actually the whole Western world, the way the system is set up, it really, the base of, now certain things were added, but the base of that system, it goes back to ancient Rome. All right, ancient Rome was the standard of how Edomites will operate moving forward. Now let's go back to the book. And of course, when Revelation 13:1, the 7 horns and the 10 horns, that the 7 heads and the 10 horns, that's talking about the EU. All right, the European Union, which the European Union is an aggregate of what Edomite nations that rose up after the Club of Rome, the League of Nations. All right, so Esau that was basically after the Renaissance, Esau rising up in the power and being set up in different places. That's why you have to go to the ancient map and see this, where the Celtics, you know about the Celtics, the Gauls. These were the lands, right? That were these were the names of those lands where Edomites basically took over, and then eventually they named those places like Germany. They named them Germany, France, and so on and so forth. All right, so you have to do your homework on that. Understand that. Now, verse 3, it says, "And I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death." Now, when you talk about the head that was wounded to death, it's talking about the Roman Empire. All right? The Roman Empire basically rose up. That's where you have to go to Daniel's the second chapter. The Roman Empire rose up and really, beat everybody up. You know what I'm saying? They had great power, and their system worked for a long period of time. It said, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, when Rome fell, it fell. Fine, of course, Rome fell socially first and foremost. Internally, socially, economically. All right, Rome went through high levels of inflation, and they could not afford their military because Rome's military was scattered across the Euro Asia part of the earth, basically, for lack of a better term. So when Rome took over, they had enough money to buy mercenaries, and they had a large army. But as they started to struggle financially, Rome started to fall. And socially, Rome had a system where they had a caste system. They had a system of elites, and then plebeians, the plebs, and the Domitians, what you call today Republicans and Democrats. So they have that system. They had that system, but the majority of the Romans were plebeians, like average, common Roman. So eventually, they had infighting, corruption, and the country kind of fell from within. The bread circus, so on and so forth. You should already know the history. Now that system, when Rome fell, they got taken over by the quote unquote barbarians. When Rome fell, that system actually never went away because the artifacts and so on and so forth were kept. All right, and when the Borgias family came back into power during the Renaissance, right, the rebirth of the Edomites, and as they progressed, they kept that mentality. The Lord made them keep that mentality. How they build stuff, right? How they would set up their system through political process. Politics is nothing new. Politics goes all the way back. All right, and this is basically what it means when it says that, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So the mindset, the mentality of ancient Rome came back during a rebirth and a renaissance all the way up to right now. All right, and everybody wonders as at the system. That's why you see the other nations, like the Moabites, the Chinese, and Ammonites, Japanese, Arabs, Ishmael, they conform to the system because it brings about wondrous things such as technology. That's why all these nations basically dumped their traditional attires and started wearing suits and ties because they wonder after the beast, after the system. All right, after the system really ultimately led by the woman that sits on top of the beast, which is the United States of America. All right, now let's go to verse 3. It says, "And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" All right. Who's able to make war who is single-handedly able to make war with the beast, which at this point is talking about not only the EU, but it's really talking about ultimately, the US. Who's able to make power with the US? Nobody. Nobody can stand against the U.S. individually. That's why in the Third World War, it's going to be an aggregate of multiple nations. And we also understand that the main reason why Babylon is going to lose is because not only is it the Lord already prophesied it, but it's because the Lord has given the other nations the ultimate equalizer, the waster, aka the ICBM nukes. All right. So it says, "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things." All right, that's what you call American exceptionalism. All right, the European way. They all believe that the cradle of civilization, civilization started with the Greeks, right? Meaning with Edomites. So that's why they are Lucifer. They are worshipped. The way their ways are worshipped. Their court systems is worshipped. All right, and if you don't practice politics, if you don't do business with the banks, you're basically looked at as a barbarian. the way they look at people living in the Middle East, the Arabs and all that, or the Africans, it's all about, well, those guys are barbarians because they don't move according to our system. All right. So now that we hit that and we understand that, that the system of ancient Rome has come back into not only the EU, but also the United States. Now we want to deal with, of course, the wound. We talked about that wound began financially. All right, that's what we need to understand, is that the wound of Rome began financially. All right, and even until this day, when you deal with Babylon the Great, I've always made the statement, and it's not just me, beginning with our apostles and elders way back, that before we you're gonna know that Babylon has truly fallen when you're gonna start to see food shortages, rations, famine. That's when Babylon is going to crumble, because Babylon is able to absorb a multitude of things: high levels of debt, fake economy, so on and so forth. But when the people, like the plebeians, when they could no longer afford basic necessities, that's how Rome started to fall apart. And from there on, it was pretty much over, and then they got taken over. But this time again is going to happen in modern day Babylon. The new Rome, aka the U.S., is going to happen again. But in this system and mentality is going to fall. It's never going to rise up again. So now, one of the things that I looked up is the Babylonians, the modern day Babylonians or modern day Romans, right? Bankruptcies, all right, and it's very interesting, because again, you're not going to see this on the news, because the propaganda is to keep the majority of you Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans ignorant and with your head in just bread and circuses and entertainment and basketball and football and all this garbage. But you have something going on. The underlying plague that's going on in Babylon is the personal bankruptcy. It says personal bankruptcy filings in the United States reach roughly 550,000 recently, driven by persistent inflation, mounting credit card debt, and high living cost. Bankruptcies have been steadily increasing for the past 3 years, though they remain significantly below the historical peaks seen in the 2010s. Now, the thing is that when you would say, well, it's only because it's about what, 300, 350, probably 370 million people in counting in Babylon. So you would think that, well, that's not a huge number, but you have to understand, these are the people that actually were the business owners. These are the people that were what you would consider the middle class, the backbone of the U.S. Because the United States has, of course, a small amount of super rich, right? The small amount of super rich individuals in Babylon, aka the U.S. They're not the ones who carry the nation, because those people actually, they find loopholes through taxes, so they don't really pay a lot of taxes. They make a lot of money, so therefore, because they make a lot of money, and they might put some money in a charity, or they might have a business, a small business. They might open up a business where they hired a couple of people, so therefore they don't pay taxes. All right, that's the loophole. They find loopholes. So the people that pay taxes are the plebs, such as ourselves. All right, Israel, right, and then the nations as well. And then you have a group of people that's kind of mid level, lower level, upper level. Those are the backbone, because those are the business owners, the people that are trying to always trying to have two or three businesses. The average American is kind of doing decent. These people got hurt tremendously during the COVID, and they had to keep up. A lot of them lost their jobs, and they had to use credit cards and so on and so forth. So that's who those are the people. That's the majority of that number, right? And I'm telling you, like 200,000 business owners in Babylon can basically feed thousands, hundreds of thousands of families, man. All right. That says recent statistics. It says current filings, non-business bankruptcies filings rose to 500. And these are not, like, this is non-business bankruptcies. filing rose to 549,000, an 11.2 increase year over. So this right here, the 549, like this is just regular plebs, meaning you and I, right? You and I, regular plebs. So you have regular people going into bankruptcy, 549. All right, and it's in counting. It says historical context, while up from pandemic era lows, total filings remain far below the nearly 1.6 million cases during the 2010 peak. All right, recent trends, consumer bankruptcy inquiries are climbing up to their highest level since before the pandemic. See, I'm gonna read this again. Recent trends, consumer bankruptcy inquiries are climbing to their highest level. So these are consumer bankruptcy inquiries. So they're inquiring because they're looking up. All right, so what chapter should I fill? So when you put that on Google, I'm trying to file for bankruptcy. And you put in, well, what chapter should I file? Google takes that research, the fact that you are inquiring, and it puts that in the data, and it's showing you like, yo, there's a lot of people in Babylon, right, in America right now that are inquiring in bankruptcy, meaning they are crashing. They're crashing, bro. They know it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time. And these are the things that happen in ancient Rome. It's just that back then, crashing in ancient Rome was a lot faster, because you didn't have the ability to borrow money, credit cards, and so on and so forth. All right. If we had a system like ancient Rome without the credit cards and stuff, this thing would have been gone. This thing would have been a long time ago. We probably would have been on the road by now. It's for sure we would have been like the road Mad Max. But because you have the credit cards, the fake economy, fake transactions going on, that's why it's taking so long, right? Um, it's a signaling potential for further increases. So now it gives you the types of personal bankruptcy, chapter 7, which is liquidation. So you got chapter 7 being filed heavy, liquidation. You have chapter 13, reorganization, bankruptcy. I know you also have chapter 11. So you have all these different things. I'm not going to go into that because that's not the point of the lesson. The point of this lesson is that bankruptcies was one of the major plagues in ancient Rome that wounded Rome, right? Because the system showed that it wasn't foolproof. All right, it wasn't foolproof. Esau's system, the way he manages his money, is built with credit. So a credit based economy is gonna fall always, and it fell back then with ancient Rome, and it's gonna fall again in not only the EU and also Babylon the Great. All right. So this wound is not going to heal. Now, this is Jeremiah 50 and 16. It says, cut off the sword from Babylon, and him that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. The sower from Babylon is, like I talk about, is the backbone of the U.S., the backbone of this economy, which was the middle class. All right, and we know the middle class basically were devastated during the year COVID, because most of them, their businesses had to be shut down, while the whole time people like super elites like Jeff Bezos had record number profit. All right, so if you were one of the super one, the point 1%, you had record profit. But if you were part of the 10%, I probably say the 25%. There was a high likelihood that your business got shut down. All right. So it says, cut off the sower from Babylon, and him that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. For fear of the oppressing sword, they shall turn everyone to his people, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. This is prophecy. All right. Jeremiah 50 speaks about something that's going to happen right here in the United States, right? And a wound, right? This is a wound right here. Cut off anything that gets cut. Every time you get something cut off, that's a wound, right? Now, we talked about, of course, the COVID thing, right? The bankruptcies, right? Now, it says, for fear of the oppressing sword. The oppressing sword is what? The oppressing sword is the hour of martial law. It's the troops, the National Guard, like I talked about. They're already getting Israel they're getting us accustomed to having a National Guard moving around the cities. And at first, the National Guard moved around the cities without arms. Now they have pistols. Then eventually, as things progress and become worse, they're gonna have AK rifles, and then it's gonna go up to Humvees, and eventually it's gonna get to the tanks. All right. So this is kind of where we're going. That's the oppressing sword. Now it says, for fifth the oppressing sword, they shall turn everyone to his own people, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. Now this is another news, right, that they're not talking about. All right, this is something that they're not talking about. Says the United States recently experienced a historic shift in migration patterns, meaning this is historic. All right, this is historic. It says, marking the first time since the Great Depression. There you go again, Great Depression, the wound, right? That plague. In 1935, it says that more people are leaving the country than entering. All right. Did you know that? Right? Did you know that? We know that Babylon was always known for a place where you just come in, right? The place where that welcomes, the immigrants from all over the world. There was always more people coming into Babylon than people leaving, right? When she came in, you had people that came here and undocumented and they never left. You had people that came here with the type of visa where it was supposed to be a student visa and they're supposed to go home and they never went back. So people usually, when they would come to this land, they would not go back. That was they plan. Although on paper they're supposed to go back, they already had plans that you're not gonna find me. You know what I'm saying? I'm going. Once I'm in there, I'm gone. You know what I'm saying? So, but now it said this is historic. It says that there's more people are leaving the country than entering. And it says this hasn't happened since what? Since you had that problem, that plague in the 30s, right? The Great Depression. And what also happened in that time? I believe this was the time we had World War One, because World War Two was in the 40s. All right, I think it's in between that. I think I think this is World War One, and then because you had the 1920 Depression all the way to 35, and then you had World War Two that started, I believe, in 1939, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, and it ended like in the 40s. So usually when you're about to enter into a Great Depression, which has to do with bankruptcies and famine, that means that there's a major war, right? A world war that's right around the corner, which we know that's going to happen. All right. So it says this trend of negative net migration is driven by a combination of both voluntary citizens relocation and stricter immigration enforcement. Key details of this movement includes record citizen immigration. Estimates show that hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens are moving overseas. Now, as a U.S. citizen, that can mean anything, right? You have a natural born U.S. citizen. You have somebody, that converted basically, right? Became a citizen. So it could be, it could be anything, right? So you have people that are here, 2, 3 generations, and it says citizen on paper, but they might be like a first, second, and third generation immigrant, but they're going to be recorded as citizens. But nah, the scripture tells you that what? The scripture tells you clearly, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. So yeah, the person could be born here, a person could come here, become a citizen, go, and then eventually they see what this shit is going, because a lot of the immigrants come from lands where they have suffered oppressing swords. They know they can see they see what's going on here in the US, and they know where this is going because they've experienced that in their own land. So, and probably they're looking at their own land now. Maybe their land has been quote unquote liberated. So therefore they're not, they don't see the same oppressing sword that they saw when they came here as a first generation. So now they're like, hold up, the US is turning into what our land was, you know what I'm saying, years ago. So they're like, hey, listen, I know I have a citizenship in the US, but they usually dual citizens. So that they find a way. They say, hey, listen, we got the money, you know, and we going back, right? Going back buying land because we know where this is going. This is going towards authoritarian. This is going to be authoritarian, and this is gonna, you're talking concentration camps, right? You're talking Constitution. Hey, the water brother. Yep. 1939, World War II. So 35 was towards the end, towards that World War One. So yeah. Um, but yeah, going back to this news right here about record citizen immigration. But it says estimates show that hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens are moving overseas. Uh, Top destinations include Mexico, which hosts an estimated 1.6 million Americans. And a lot of those 1.6 million Americans are actually Mexican, so-called Mexican, right, Issacharites of birth, by birth. They just have American citizenship, and they made enough money to the point where they see where this is going, and they're hightailing out of here. Why? Because again, it's prophecy. It's not by coincidence. It's prophecy, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. So it's not just Americans for the like natural born. Like you're not really like the brainwashing was always like there's no other place like the U.S. So like why would you want to go anywhere else? It's kind of like the Titanic is the Titanic, right? And you've been brainwashed and thinking, hey man, like nowhere else is like the Titanic. So if you're gonna sink, you're gonna sink with the Titanic. So that's the mindset of 90% or 95% of American citizens natural born. So it's like these definitely most of these numbers right here are people that were actually either they were born here, but they literally came from their family came from abroad. All right, because it fits the prophecy. It says, as well as European Union nations like Portugal, Spain, and the Netherlands. It says primary motivations. It says surveys and consultation with relocation firms reveal that Americans are leaving due to a variety of push and pull factors. The most frequently cited reasons are the rising cost of living, which the rising cost of living was something that was also a problem in ancient Rome. A lot of when you go again, that's why you have to go into the history of Rome and that the beast that was wounded and it was healed. You have to go back because you will understand that the things that are happening right now also happened in ancient Rome, right? As Rome became really costly, only really the rich Romans could live in Rome at that time. Like it got so bad that a lot of Romans basically left. They would leave Rome, and Rome, the Romans were proud, like living in Rome. That was a thing, and so if even when you were a Roman living outside of Rome, you let everybody know that you were like a Roman citizen, like Paul. Even Paul gave you the example, right? Paul showed you in the scriptures how big of a deal it was to be a Roman because when he got put in the court and they was trying to nail him on some bullshit ass charges, he said, "Listen, man, I'm a Roman citizen." And it was like, "Oh shit, yeah, we might have to shut this shit down. I gotta." Basically, Paul was like, "Yo, you gotta call some people because I got Roman citizenship." So at that time, Rome became so bad, even some of the Romans had to leave out of Rome. So and it's the same thing that's happening right now, man. It says the most frequently cited reasons are the rising cost of living, a search for greater affordability and safety, and disenchantment with the current political climate. Well, safety. Hold up. You live in the United States. Don't you have a 2-8, right? Second Amendment. So you have freedom of speech. So you're going to leave freedom of speech. You're going to leave the 2-8 because of safety? Hold on. If you really was about safety, wouldn't you want to like definitely keep your 2-8 and be in a place where you have so-called freedom of speech? But you leaving that because of safety? No, it's because you're well aware where this is going. You know that the oppressing sword is right around the corner, which is martial law, which is concentration camps. These people know what is coming. That's why they're getting the fuck up out of here. And that's according to prophecy. All right. So this is what it means to be a prophet, is to engage in prophecy, and you have to go into the news. You have to have the pulse of the nation so you can bring that information and match that with the scriptures. All right. If you're not doing that, then what you're not really a prophet. Now you can speak about prophecy, but you have to be able to merge the real world with the scriptures. All right, so let's see. Immigration policies. Beyond citizens choose to leave, stricter immigration policies and deportation efforts have significantly reduced the number of new immigrants arriving in the U.S. So that's a part of it. Yeah. I'm not going to read the rest of that. Uh, I like this. It says because the United States does not officially track citizens who move abroad, exact demographic departures are calculated using data compiled from foreign governments, property purchases, and overseas student enrollment. So yeah, they don't know what the type of citizen. They just say, well, that's a U.S. citizen. Well, what if that's a U.S. citizen that came from a foreign family? And he's just going back home because he understands what's going on. So this is the base. This is that wound, and it just cannot be healed because this leads to chaos. All right, this leads to chaos. Now, this is Isaiah chapter 19:1. Right, Isaiah chapter 19:1. It says message to Egypt. As we know right here, Egypt is talking about spiritual Egypt. The scripture speaks about and it speaks about Babylon in Revelation, being as what spiritual Sodom and Egypt, because of the mentality, the idol worship, and the lifestyle. All right, the depravity of Sodom and Egypt, because Sodom and Gomorrah, and in Egypt the depravity, the idol worship. Okay, so the message to Egypt is really the message to modern day Babylon or modern day Rome, which is the U.S. It says, the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord YAHAWASHI shall rideth upon a swift cloud and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst. Now, basically, what it means is that the Heavenly Father Yahweh is going to send his son YAHWASHI, and he's going to come upon a multitude of chariots, and he's going to cover the skies of the U.S., and there's going to be beams coming out of those chariots, those clouds, and that's going to scare a lot of it's going to scare everybody. But then you're going to see individuals, right, Israelites elect, all right, from respective tribes, men, women, and children, get beamed into those chariots, into those clouds. That's what the scripture means. Verse 2, but it says before that, verse 2 actually jumps into what's going to happen before verse 1, and it says, I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Matthew 12:22, I believe, says what? A nation under civil war is doomed. And what we've witnessed dating back to 2015 when Nero, aka Donald Trump, took over, was that you had a major division in a major political division, really not just politically, and everything. Everybody's divided on everything. All right, nobody agrees. Right, Americans right now are the most divided they've ever been since the first Civil War. All right, and the first Civil War actually it wasn't even as bad because the first Civil War actually took place in a certain parts of the country. Right, it wasn't a whole country that was involved, right, in the first Civil War. Like, this Civil War is neighbor against neighbor. Like, your next door neighbor is a Republican and you're a Democrat. Y'all are beefing. Y'all can't be friends. Y'all can't be neighbors, right? You driving by kicking his trash can, right? You driving by kicking his trash can. Why? Because he got that Trump sign, right? He got that MAGA sign on his yard. So you driving, kicking his trash can, or you throwing shit on his yard. Well, what's going to happen is that when the famine kicks in, which we're going to get into that, when the famine kicks in, and then chaos, comes into play, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to drive by your neighbor's house who's a Republican or a Democrat, and guess what you're going to do? You're going to let off some some slugs, basically. You know what I'm saying? You're going to light the place up. That's the spirit that the Lord is going to bring forth in Babylon, man. A spirit of actual hatred, all right, self-hatred. Isaiah 19:15, it says, neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do. All right. And when you look at these job numbers, they're coming out worse and worse. In 2026, these job numbers on a monthly basis, you got to look at these things. They're coming out worse and worse. They expect that they'll have an expectation of 250,000 and they'll get 160. All right. You have people that actually are no longer even applying All right, you have people that know they're not even a part of the economy. They gave up. All right. They say that a record number of millennials cannot afford housing. Which the millennials are grown like me. I'm a millennial, right? The people in my generation, we can't afford housing. This shit is crazy. Like you could barely just afford a one bedroom apartment in most states. So the and Gen Z, they just not there. Like and Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they don't even have jobs. They're the brokest generation out of all the generations. Then you got the old boomers that have their money and they still in power, they splurging, and they don't give a fuck. So 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 now you have generational wars. I don't know if you brothers know this. There's a generational war. Like boomers, like you have like Gen X's and millennials say, all these damn boomers. Because the majority of people in Congress and all these are boomers, right? These are old farts. And they passing laws that are detrimental to the youth because they don't give a fuck. So you got this war that's going on. So it's total chaos, and that was the wound that also was a detriment to ancient Rome. That's how Rome went down because the plebs started losing their minds and crashing out against the Domitians, and then you had civil wars, and then eventually, man, Rome collapsed. Rome couldn't take it anymore, man. The famine came in. The Romans was catching, they had pestilences, diseases in Rome. The water was dirty. Like they couldn't even pay. Like Rome had an extended. Everybody that knows about ancient Rome knows like the water thing that they had. I forgot the term. How they moved the water around Rome. That's how the United States actually and all the Western world like that's how they moved the water around all the cities. Like the way you get your water through the pipes underground shit, they got that shit from Rome. The Romans did that. They will move water underground through the water pipes. They got it from Rome. But then the people that were taking care of that, they wasn't getting paid. So they said, fuck that. So all that water that was coming in Rome was dirty and people was drinking dirty water and getting sick. That's when the nation is falling apart. All right. So um this is Revelation 6 and 5 in the NASB 995. All right, the NASB 95. Um, that's right, brother. Hey, I knew you was gonna get. I was gonna get it. I was gonna get it as part of my precepts, but I figured I was just gonna like verbally say it. Tobit 4:13. That's right, Tobit 4:13. Let me read it right quick. It says, "Now therefore, my son, love thy brethren and despise not in thy heart thy brethren, the sons and daughters of thy people, and not taking a wife of them. For in pride is destruction and much trouble, and in lewdness, which is degeneracy, in lewdness is decay and great want. For lewdness is the mother of famine." Right, degeneracy is the mother of famine. So famine comes on the land because the people are degenerate. All right. So the Lord brings a plague called famine because the people in the land are degenerates. That's how you get famine. Um, Revelation 6 and 5. As a matter of fact, we're gonna go into it now. Revelation 6 and 5. It says, "When he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, 'Come.' I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand." All right, the black horse with the scale in his hand. It says, verse 6, "And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius.'" Now, what's a denarius? Let's look that up. A denarius, ancient Roman silver coin, 1570. All right, denarius. It says containing 10. All right, the coin containing 10 aces by tens. That's a denarius. An English money reckoning a penny. So the denarius, so we know what that is. Let's go back. Revelation 6 and 6. And it says, "And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine.'" So now what's a barley? Let's look that up. A barley, hardy cereal plant, or barley, all right? Body like, all right? Coarse grain meal, all right? So it's grain. That's what barley is. So now let's get the understanding of that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to let's go here commentary. So in commentary we want to go to text commentaries. All right, so we want to go here. Bible says Revelation 6:5-6. All right, so let's go over this. Make sure. All right, let's get it. Let's get it. No. I gotta skip that. That's a little too long. All right, there you go. Right here, we're gonna start at taking. We're gonna start at taking together. All right, it says. Taken together, the horsemen revealed after the breaking of the first four seals are commonly referred to as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The word apocalypse comes from the Greek apocalyptica, which means uncovering or revealing, right? That's the word revelation. The word revelation translates the Greek word apocalypsis. All right, Revelation 1:1. It says the third horse is a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. We saw first a white horse with a crown to conquer, then a second horse with a sword to bring war, and now the third black horse with a pair of scales to bring famine. All right, there you go. So that's where we're going. That's where we're going into. All right, the third horse, the black horse. That's the horse that brings famine. All right, and that horse means it's a season. All right, it's a season. It's a power. And that's basically what it is. It says the ancient world. So we're going to get an understanding of the commerce of ancient Rome, because that's that wound, that deadly wound. It started with the economy. It started with the commerce of ancient Rome. All right. It says the ancient world scales were used to weigh goods to determine the price, and were also used to weigh currency. They were often manipulated with weights on one side to overcharge customers, right? Again, overcharging customers. That's what happens with commerce when you talk about Edom, Esau, and also the heathens and Israelites that were doing this bullshit in the temple and the Lord. That's why the Lord was pissed off, because it's a heathen custom, right, to mismanage, to overprice, right, and to manipulate the weight and the currency, man. It's an evil, heathenistic custom. That's why HASHAM got pissed off. And you gonna do this bullshit in front of my temple? That's why he lost it, because he didn't really give a fuck about that temple, but he just hated the idea that niggas was doing this shit, right? The horseman now weighs wheat and barley. All right, so now we're gonna get to the understanding. And it says, and I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and wine. Verse 6. A denarius is equivalent to a day's wage. All right. A day's wage. So what you make in a day. It says a quart of wheat has roughly enough calories to sustain one adult for one day. Wheat. Think about that. So you make a day's wage and you got to buy this wheat. But what about everything else? Well, you shit out of luck. You shit out of luck, right? Because it's like, hold on, I just worked all this day just to get like a quart of wheat to like for my. So what about everything else? Well, shit. You going to have to go and make more money. That's why now you notice that the thing in Babylon is what? You got to make more money. You got to make more money, right? You got to do something. You got to boss up. You got to make more money. Well, why? Because you fighting the plague of inflation. All right. You battling, you trying to survive the black horse. It says a quart of wheat has roughly enough calories to sustain one adult for one day. Wheat would be considered a tastier, higher quality alternative to barley. Right. That's why it says, as you notice, it says a quart of wheat, right? And then 3 quarts of barley, because barley is not as good, right? It says wheat will be considered a tastier, highly quality alternative to barley. Barley has about the same number of calories as wheat. So 3 quarts of barley might be enough for 3 people or a family of 2 adults. So instead of like with that denarius, instead of getting that good wheat, You like, you looking at your family, looking at your wife, your children, you looking at your, your bills, and you like, yeah, man, we gonna instead of getting that wheat, we gonna get that barley, bro. You know what I'm saying? We gonna get that lesser. And that's what's happening right now in Babylon. And the fact that in these United States, the Babylonians have to go to second hand, third hand, aftermarket, right? That's something that's booming right now. And that's the commerce that's booming in Babylon, right? That nobody's talking about. The majority of Babylonians they're not doing brand names. Right? Listen, I was just in a spot. With the bros, man. We was kicking it at one of the spots we kick at, man. So I was, with this um, you know, this little thing, man, and all of a sudden she's like, hey, I guess you seen this chick. She had this white dress that kind of stood out. I'm like, so this chick, the one that I was with, she's like, well, oh yeah, I like that. Oh, that dress right there. Like, I like that dress. I seen it and I wanted to get it. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, that dress, that girl right there. Yeah. Yeah, that dress. Yeah, I seen it on Sheen. And I was like, Sheen? I was like, what? I was like, oh shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, but so cause Sheen is known as what? These are aftermarket, you know what I'm saying? Second and third brand, and I'm like, we in a place where, it's ambiance and music, people buying drinks, people trying to stunt. And then, but you got people in there with Sheen and all that, meaning third. Why? Because people making decisions, man. They're all being affected by the black horse, man. So they're going cheap. That's just the reality of it, man. So let's keep going. It says, I'm gonna read this again. It says, start right here. Barley has about the same number of calories as wheat. So 3 quarts of barley might be enough for 3 people, or a family or 2 adults and 2 small children for one day. But there is only enough to survive a bread and water diet, so to speak. All right. So meaning, and that's what happened in ancient Rome. All right. That's how it started. Rome started to fall this way. And that's the same thing that's happening to modern day Rome, all right? To Babylon the Great, the virgin daughter of Babylon. It says the point seems to be that there is great scarcity of supplies on the earth. No one can get enough food to last them until the next day. Bruh, I don't know about y'all brothers, but listen, man, we feeling it. We all of us, even men of the Lord, we feeling it, right? But see, we've been expecting this. So we don't run around with our heads cut off like a chicken with his head cut off, like, yo, man, my lifestyle, and I'm having to pay more for fuel, for food. This was prophesied. This was prophesied. So we've been expecting this. All right. It says there can only be barely enough to feed themselves. There will be nothing left to focus on pleasure, just enough to seek survival. And that's exactly what's going on right now. The clubs are going out, the restaurants are going out. Like, people are not really spending because people are broke. Inflation, as the black horse, these things is happening right now. All right. The phrase "and do not damage the oil in the wine" might indicate that oil and wine are no longer in everyday use, but are now saved for special occasions. That would again suggest a scarcity of food supplies. So yeah, man, as you see, you know, this is exactly what we're going through right now in this, it's prophecy. So we're gonna start to close out. This is Isaiah 47:1. It says, "Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate." All right. And that's talking about the U.S. currently, of course. Take the millstone and grind meal. All right, that grind. It says, "Uncover thy locks. Make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers." Well, that's why all the shit that's been done in the dark is coming out, from the political corruption, child trafficking, Epstein, right? Everything is being exposed right now, man. Everybody's realizing that yes, Babylon has been at the top, but these are the things that Babylon has done over and over and over to stay at the top. All right. When you have stuff like the UN, being, well, listen, that might get my YouTube might actually, let's just say, man, fuck, man, listen, you find out, and this is, you can actually Google this, man, like UN ships being stopped, and they found like children, um, in those ships, man. UN, United Nations ships, man. I'm gonna just leave it at that, bro. Um, let's go to verse 3. It says, "Thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man." So Yahushua said he's coming back, and he's not gonna come back to speak politics, to do deals with Babylon or the Edomites. He's coming to deliver his people, destroy the dragon and his might, enslave the nations, and set up his people as the next rulers forever and ever. Revelation 18:10, it says, "Standing afar off for the fear of atonement, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is that judgment come." So when Yahushua delivers his elect, Lord willing, I'm part of it, right? We're going to be afar off. We're going to be in the upper atmosphere, and we're going to witness Babylon basically, turn into what the scripture calls a lake of fire. Why? Because at that point, that will be the climax of the Third World War, and everybody's going to be shooting ICBMs. And the scripture, says that 200 million warheads, nuclear warheads, are going to hit this place, and there's going to be that's what's going to turn this place into the lake of fire, spoken of in Revelation 20. All right, so now Job chapter 20 verse 4, it says, "Knowest thou not this of old, since man was placed upon the earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite before a moment." Right, so Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, the devil that the Bible speaks of, he is the master hypocrite. Right, he is the most evil entity on the planet Earth, but then yet he speaks about how he is the police and righteousness and integrity, and he speaks about high moral, high ground. We're the good guys, bullshit, right? When the whole time it's an empire. It's the evil empire from Star Wars, man, with a bunch of Sith lords and Darth and Darth and Vaders. That's all it is, man. Though his excellency mount up to the heavens, and his head reach unto the clouds, yet he shall perish forever like his own dung. They which have seen him shall say, Where is he? So, hey, listen, under these same skies, man, we're gonna wake up and be like, damn, bro, just a few weeks ago, we were like, we were still under Edomite occupation, but we were still in that land, like we were in that land, bro. And it's gonna hit us different, man. When the salvation actually comes, I don't know how it's gonna feel, but I sure as hell can't wait to experience that. Lord willing, I'm a part of the elect. You know what I'm saying? Now we're gonna conclude with Revelation 13:9. It says, "If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." All right, and that concludes the lesson about how the empire is not going to survive this deadly wound. Meaning this empire, which is the reincarnation of the old empire, is not going to survive this wound. All right, so hopefully you were edified as well as I was to the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI. I know brothers had some beautiful precepts there, man. Shalom to y'all. Yeah, man. We have to continue to be patient and continue to stick in prophecy. These other camps, they're coming apart. They're saying wild shit. They're being exposed. They're not dealing with prophecy. They're a bunch of niggas, grimy demons, right? Just talking reckless. And the most had, and it's no need of lose sleep over these ISUPK dudes and the latest nonsense. I don't even want, because you can't stop these niggas from talking crazy, bro. Like, it's so bad. That's why I'm like, man, it's so bad, bro. Like, they're worse than the Christian church. They just say random shit. And that fat motherfucker, man, that's teaching while drinking scotch and shit, man. Yeah, man. Anyways, listen. That's all I gotta say with that, man. Hopefully you were edified through the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI, man. Call halal, like YAHAWASHI, YAHAWASHI, HaKadosh. Double honors to our apostles and elders of great millstone and shalom and salutation to you, sincere elect. Shalom.